options. That's what you said. Options.
Mm-hmm.
Options give you power.
Mm-hmm.
And if all of a sudden you realize you don't have options that you thought you did, you felt like it was stripped away.
Yeah, and options.
And you were robbed.
Yeah, yeah. And without options, unfortunately, sometimes people can take advantage of you, or you're in a more vulnerable position, or whatever. So options takes a lot of that, and either can save you money, or can save you frustration, or put you in a better position.
We're going to be chit-chatting a little bit more about what's been happening lately in the field. Like it's great to talk about the game.
Yeah.
Let's call it the game tonight, okay?
There-
We're going to
there
do
we
some
go.
sports analogies, right?
Yeah.
It's great to talk about what it's like to be in the game,
Mm-hmm.
talk about the playbook,
Mm-hmm.
right? The coaching.
Mm-hmm.
But then it really gets real when we start playing and we're in the game.
Yeah.
And these things just happen.
Yeah, the hit that we took, the hit that we made,
Right, the great
the
deep
throw,
throw.
yeah, yeah. The actual play-by-play. Yeah, this is in the trenches, maybe.
I love it. Yeah. So we're gonna share and do this a little more from time to time, is the things we've been talking about and the expectations we're setting up of what we do, how we do it, and how we have these processes and the perfection of those processes and the excellence we strive for. But now we're going to give some in the trenches, real time. Here's some stories. Here's some things that just happened.
Yeah, food for thought, and how things can play out in a good way, and we'll be honest about sharing things if they work out in a bad way too sometimes.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, sometimes there's a learning lesson.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And anybody who says they don't have learning lessons, they're
lying.
They're
Yeah. Well, the thing I will say though
are.
is we pride ourselves on learning those lessons way sooner than later, so we don't have to repeat them.
Well, here's the deal. You like to communicate. I like to communicate. Maybe sometimes we're over communicators, but here's what I know here's what I know for a fact. Whether you're winning or losing, communication is key.
Mm-hmm.
It's the driving force behind it.
Yeah.
It's either the excellence of it or the lack thereof.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. Maybe we topic these in the trenches moment or what have you. But yeah, I think today we had some things that we discussed in the trench moments about just the beautiful side of planning, which is one of the biggest things that I see by virtue of how people get into the home market to buy or decide to sell. And we touched on this prior in one of our prior podcasts. Because there's so much information out there, I think there can be a tendency for clients to really feel like they've got it all, not figured out, but they know a lot of things already.
Right.
Which is good. It's helpful, but there's also can be gaps that need to be filled in, because if they're not, some of those gaps are painful.
Well, so you had experience.
Mm-hmm.
Just happened?
Mm-hmm. Over the weekend, actually.
Over the weekend?
Yep.
So, I mean, tell us a little bit about that, because it was like, okay, that worked out beautiful because of what you did.
Yeah. So a little bit of backstory. It was working with a client about 3 months or so ago, and the conversation was, I don't know if I'm going to buy, for a number of different reasons, and I won't bore you with all those details, but, I'm going to rent now. What do you think I should do? And I said, well, I mean, there's case for renting and buying.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of in that precarious position, not precarious, but you're in the position where you could make a case for either or.
Right.
What I would recommend is that you at least position yourself to do whatever is preferable. So we've got an agreement that we'd reach out to a lender, have the conversation, get pre-qualified. Didn't hurt it other than some time investment in doing that, found out what the options were, what you could qualify for, what type of home you want. And then we just kind of looked out in the marketplace and said, with this budget, in these timelines with what's going on, like this is kind of your options available on the buy side. She didn't know what her options were going to look like on the rental side, because the landlord, has shown a tendency to maybe throw some curveballs at the last minute.
Mm-hmm.
So she didn't kind of know how that was going to play out at the end.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's happening more than not in the last year or two. Curveballs to people renting.
Yeah,
Seen that firsthand.
Especially when landlords get the bright idea that their place is worth way more than it was before, or what have you, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, they just come out of the blue. I've heard hundreds of dollars more increase,
hundreds,
20%, 30%
Oh,
higher
yeah.
than what it was before.
Oh yeah.
And that's painful to try to recover from that when you're, a month or two before the end of your lease. Now you're scrambling.
Well, what you said is she didn't know,
Right.
but you took the time to get an idea of what is going to be guiding us,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the information we need to have. It's kind of like if you're going to go on a long journey,
Mm-hmm.
you need to pack some food, some water, and be prepared.
Right.
But if it's just a short hike around the corner of the mailbox, you don't take all that.
Yeah.
You need to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
What's my goal? What's my timeline? Options. That's what you said.
Options.
Options give you power.
Mm-hmm.
And if all of a sudden you realize you don't have options that you thought you did, you felt like it was stripped away.
Yeah. And options.
And you were robbed.
Yeah. Yeah. And without options, unfortunately, sometimes, people can take advantage of you, or you're in a more vulnerable position or whatever. So options takes a lot of that, and either can save you money or can save you frustration or put you in a better position.
Options is such a great feeling. When you have no options,
that's a horrible feeling.
That's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough. And sometimes people are put in that, and it's life, right?
Yeah.
You roll with the punches.
Yeah.
But so you set her up,
Mm-hmm.
got an idea of here's the kind of game plan of what the world we get to play in,
Mm-hmm.
work within.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden,
so coming down, gets a notice from her landlord, and she gets the information about what the next step with them looks like, and it's not desirable.
Yeah.
It's higher rent at a longer term.
Right.
And she's like, well, I don't, I won't share all the details, but
Right.
it was clearly like, that's not of my best interest.
Yeah, it's becoming a win-lose.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just kicked her over into the category of, well, now buying could make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because of the
Correct.
dollars you got coming out of your account every month.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's look harder at what's out there. And actually this came, the kind of search went a little bit before we found out the detail, but there was kind of this, hey, I have the ability to look around. Let's look in a little bit more detail to know where it might land in case the landlord comes back to me without, such a good, response to what we're going to do going forward. And it's like, wow, there's some nice homes out there in the map to all of my needs, my objectives, right? It's in the right area. It's in the right price point. It's low maintenance. There's just a lot of, objectives that would make it attractive to buy the home. And when you know it, we found a couple options that really map to it real well.
Yeah. You set her up to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there you go. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Right?
Yeah.
You set her up for her to understand, here's where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the options I have within that realm.
Mm-hmm.
And let's go do this because now it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep. And you weren't trying to push something before. It was like, maybe renting is going to be a good place for a while, but let's go ahead and get some things set up.
Yeah.
Let's get get our ducks in a row in some different areas.
Mm-hmm.
So if the time comes, you have options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you understand what those are.
Yep. Absolutely. So to your point, it just created a sense of comfort that, man, I can go this way or that way, whatever I want to do. And, my job is to create that safe position of making that decision.
Yeah.
I would have been totally fine either way. Whatever's in your best interest.
Right.
If it's rent for, the year or indefinitely, that's okay.
Right.
I just want what's best for you. If it happens to be buying, I'd be honored to help you through it.
Here's the alternative scenario to that. So you don't encourage her to find out where she's at on the finance side.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to make sense? What kind of home she's going to be able to buy, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't find that out.
Right.
You're like, well, it's none of my business. I really don't need to ask you that. Maybe buying's a good idea. Maybe it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But, when the time's right, let me know if you want to go look.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the notice comes. Hey, you got to make a choice, and you got to make it by this date.
Yeah.
And if you don't,
Right.
you got to commit to another year lease.
Yeah.
Or go find a new place to rent.
Right. So
then all of a sudden, guess what happens? whew, that feeling of stress and
Mhm.
pressure and time and anxiety sets in.
Mhm.
And now you're trying to figure out, well, what can I qualify? I don't even know what I can look at, what I can buy. And now you're trying to get that done.
Yeah.
Right? And that doesn't take very long.
Yeah.
But you just added all this anxiety.
This is the definition.
And you're feeling like you're being forced into buying a
Yep.
home now.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the definition in of our industry of being proactive versus reactive.
Yes.
Yeah. And had you been reactive and come to me and said, look, my landlord's unrealistic, I don't want all this, let's scramble, I'm certainly going to help out as best I can, but that's not the preferred position I'd like to be in to best serve my client. You know, because there's just a lot going on in a rapid fire scenario, and you know, decisions can be made less desirably in that scenario than if you had mapped it all out, planned it all out.
I'd rather have some arrows in my quiver that I may never use than to sit there and be wishing I had some.
Correct. Yeah, good analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounded like you had one recently too. That kind of that whole planning, let's get ahead of it, let's talk through it thing.
Yeah, so we're working with a family dynamic, and had a chance. They were a referral. Had a chance to go show them a home. Of course, I'm getting to know them while we're looking at this home. I'm asking a lot of questions. We're talking about what they like, what their vision is, and so with that led the idea to another home that might kind of fit them. So a couple of days later, we looked at another one. Again, I'm asking questions and following up on what I'm hearing. And
Which is a big part of what we got to do, because we got to solve a problem if we don't know the answers.
I'm hearing you say this. I'm hearing you say that. I want to make sure I'm listening and understanding correctly. With that, we got into the fact that the second home, I mean, we also may have found it. Like function, the need, okay, along with the dream, all of a sudden just like fit.
Wow.
Okay, which is really cool.
Yeah. We love when that happens.
I mean, I knew we were heading in the right direction from what I learned from the first one. But so what happened is then as I'm asking questions, I'm learning, I'm listening, then all of a sudden I realized, okay, well, we have another home out of the area that needs to sell that's going to help finance this. So then I automatically are shifting gears, and I'm like, okay, guys, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about what your goals are, what your timelines are, and what those options are going to be within those.
Because it gets hairy when you have a contingent home sale offer.
So once upon a time, those weren't even like mentioned. Like, don't even mention that to me.
I'm not going to accept that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we're getting back to like they're becoming a real thing again.
Yeah.
And there are people who are willing to consider.
If you present a good case for it.
Correct.
If you just say, I'm selling a home, it's like, well, tell me.
Yep.
Why?
So I started going through, okay, here's where you're at with the sell, and here's the things you need to understand, and here's the things we need to look at based on how it affects this buying this other home. And here's some of the options. You know, you can finance, you can go ahead and make an offer, understanding that they're going to say, well, maybe, but maybe I'm going to continue to market, or maybe I'm going to do a bump clause where you don't have so much time if a buyer comes to me, who knows what. But I just laid out all the options and said, here's all the options and here's the scenarios. We need to come up with a plan A and a plan B.
Yeah, rather than just writing it up and hoping that it works.
Right, and so we talked about timelines. We talked about what those things would look like. And they asked me a ton of questions. What does this mean? What about that? And we just sit there and worked through them. And we talked about them. And in the end, it allowed them to feel really good about, they understood, they had a clear view of what was ahead, the directions it could go. But they also knew that what their options were going to be and how they would choose, whether they would choose an option A or option B. So,
I love it.
I mean, it made it really enjoyable. It made it, and of course, there's no right answer. It's just what's right for them.
Yeah. Well, I think you're touching on two very important things. One is the planning stage that we were talking about that fits right into this conversation. But there's also, what I'm hearing is the relational mindset that you have to want to watch out for their best interest, to have a long-term relationship with these folks, instead of what we see quite often in the market are the transactional-minded agents that just want to get the deal done. And for them, it's about which is going to be the path of least resistance and the quickest outcome, because it's a transaction. So this is kind of, again, the epitome of it, the perfect example of why working with a relational agent versus a transactional agent is going to yield the best outcome.
Well, and that's what makes the journey so fun too, because I'm actually was getting to know these family members, really, really great people, but I was really enjoying and loving getting to know them, understanding what their vision was. That eventually what they want to do is they want to live under the same roof, but have just kind of little separate corridors.
Oh, cool.
And this home we found does that.
Multi-generational.
Yeah, and like it's really neat.
Mm-hmm.
So they're excited, and now it's kind of up to them what makes sense for them.
Yeah. Well, and kudos to you, because that's a tough find to find a multi-generational. Yeah, I mean, you could pile a bunch of people in a house for sure, but it's it's not. You gotta have a little bit of space, and when you put that many family members in, and especially different generations, you kind of want that time. They're going to do different things, different activities. So again, back to that whole the relationship is let's take the time to find that, not let's hurry up and find one.
Yeah.
Yep. Two drastically different approaches.
Yeah.
So well, cool.
Good
Well,
stuff.
I'll be curious to hear how it plays out, but hopefully, in today's episode, we were able to share with you, why it's important to start the process sooner than later, why it's important to map it out, plan it out, to get yourself some options. There's just all kinds of reasons why in today's, real estate engagement process, you can come in, kind of hit it hard thinking that all this stuff, and now you're like, okay, now I got to engage with an agent because I already found a house, and you've missed a lot of the either steps and or questions that you think you might have already planned out, and maybe you did, but in our experience, all too often it's not. So we just want to be a resource for you to help you out as best we can.
Yeah, we love talking about where you're at, your goals, timelines, and the options you have within those.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so if we can answer any questions for you, just feel free to reach out. We're always, no obligation, no pressure here. If we can just kind of, get to know you, answer some questions, but we'd love to do so.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, with that, I'll wish you a blessed day.
Hey, and remember this, wherever you're at, make the most of it and be in the moment.